the supreme laws that are thought to be for the needs of every modern and developed country, as well as being a law whether it has been done or will be done. It is especially crucial for Malaysians to understand what is written in the Constitution. In addition, politics and the Constitution are two things that are inextricably linked. This is because politics requires a constitution to be used as a guideline to govern the country, while the constitution requires politics to ensure that the provisions of the law have been complied with. As Malaysians, we must follow the constitution. You must follow the constitution whether you are a normal citizen, a member of parliament, a judge, or hold any other position. Lastly, the constitution is particularly important because to ensure political stability and create an efficient administration. Apart from that, the constitution is also important to provide well-being and ensure the safety of Malaysians. Furthermore, it can prevent abuse of power in the government and the likelihood of risk confrontations like the one that occurred on May 13, 1969. As a result, it is clear that the Constitution is crucial, and we as Malaysians, no matter how high a position a person holds, must abide by the Constitution.
Following that, the Malaysian Ministry of Foreign Affairs, MOFA, pursues an independent, principled, and reasonable foreign policy based on the goals of peace, humankind, and equality. The purpose of Malaysia's comprehensive foreign policy is to actively contribute to a just and equitable society via effective diplomacy while defending the country's sovereignty and interest. Malaysia's foreign policy is heavily impacted and driven by three major factors, which is the country's strategic position in Southeast Asia, its traits as a trading nation, and its particular demographics. Although foreign policy procedures have developed in response to changes in internal and external circumstances, the essential conceptions of such policy have remained consistent since independence. In addition, strong and good relations with other regional countries as well as commitment to the system from various directions are the foundations of the country's development. Malaysia, led by current Prime Minister Datuk Sri Ismail Sabri Yaakob, likewise pursues a visionary and practical foreign strategy that encourages business, garnering foreign investment interest, and depicts Malaysia as a sturdy and harmony nation. Malaysia's contribution to the United Nations UN mission demonstrates its commitment to the international community's mission to establish hush and safety. Malaysia will continue to actively participate in United Nations and other international forums, as well as efforts to find solutions to diverse global issues. From isolation and unilateral action, Malaysia will continue to emphasize dialogue and collaboration. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs, MOFA, is also responsible for a number of critical tasks. This is owing to Malaysia's Ministry of External Affairs, which is in charge of the country's foreign relations. These include relations in the areas of politics, economics, security, and social and cultural development. The implementation of the country's objectives and diplomatic policies, as well as applicable laws and regulations, are among these responsibilities. The MOFA is also in charge of the CPC's, state leaders, and foreign leaders' diplomatic efforts. Other responsibilities include directing and coordinating the work of local governments and state council departments in foreign affairs, reviewing important foreign affairs regulations of local governments and state council departments, requesting foreign affairs direction from the state council, and making recommendations to relevant government departments on how to handle major incidents involving violations of foreign affairs laws. A third obligation is the transmission of information about significant diplomatic actions and the evolution of foreign policy, among other things. It also undertakes information-related work on significant diplomatic actions, organizes public diplomacy efforts, and tackles issues concerning foreign journalists and resident foreign news organizations in China. The MOFA also pursued diplomatic interactions on maritime demarcation and collaborative development.
Internal Security Act 1960 is known as the Preventive Detention Law, which was originally launched in the early 1960s during the national emergency as a temporary way to combat the communist insurgency. The original act came into force for West Malaysia on 1 August 1960 and East Malaysia on 16 September 1963. So, action has been taken and it has been threatened by a large group of people inside and outside Malaysia. When the act went into effect, it did allow for judicial analysis, but the ISA has been modified more than 20 times since then, and a new provision has emerged. Malaysia has received various international criticism of its legal security for decades. It is known as laws that violate human rights standards and have been recognized internationally. These laws have been applied to human beings peacefully to express their religious and political belief. However, on September 12, 2001, the United States launched an attack. Since the attack, the government that had once criticized such legislation has suddenly fallen silent. As a result, they have enacted similar security laws in their own country, and even they no longer voice an opinion for the protection of human rights in Malaysia. Although the ISA started from a temporary measure enacted to counter specific threats at the end of British colonial rule, the ISA managed to counter the attacks carried out on 11 September. According to Section 73, Class 1 of the ISA, the police may detain any person for 16 days without a warrant or trial and without the assistance of lawyer if they are suspected of acting or are likely to act in a manner prejudicial to Malaysian security. As a result, it can be seen that they have changed the way they arrest and detain people in order for them to peacefully express their religious and political belief. Lots of people have spent years, if not decades, of their life in prison for failing to appear in court. Based on former ISA detainees, they state that they have experienced several physical and mental torture, like sleep, were forced to strip naked and received threats to harm them or their families. The detainee also claimed to have been kept alone in a small dark cell. Because of the excruciating torture, some detainees signed statement declaration under pressure. According to Section 73, Clause 1 of the ISA, the law has been repeatedly criticized by Malaysian human rights organizations, the Malaysian Bar Council, and international human rights fundamental groups who have called for its repeal. Due to the issue that had arisen, Tun Dr. Mahathir strongly protect the ISA. According to him, it is useful in combating rebel groups that threaten national security. Therefore, through the ISA, we can see what will happen if the state promotes security at the expenses of human rights. Moreover, it shows that only starting with temporary measures implemented in response to the threats they feel to national security can become permanent. Only with additional changes, it becomes more stringent from time to time, thus affecting basic institutions such as the judiciary.
Now let's move on to the next part, which is defense. First and foremost, National Defense of Malaysia strategy. There are several strategies provided in order to have an effective and efficient defense by confronting the increasing challenges. Thus, the National Defense of Malaysia is revolving three pillars, which are concentric deterrence, comprehensive defense, and credible partnerships. Furthermore, the first part is National Defense of Malaysia's vision. The National Defense vision is being portrayed by Malaysia as a secure, sovereign, and prosperous nation. Moreover, the second part is National Defense of Malaysia's interests. The National Defense of Malaysia's interests has been implemented based on the vision provided. There are three National Defense of Malaysia's interests, which are security, sovereignty, and prosperity. The security interest is referring to the action of protecting the mainland of the nation, MMZ, strategic waterways, airspace, and critical lines of communication. Next, sovereignty is referring to the action of conserving independence and avoiding any external obstructions. Finally, the prosperity interest is referring to the action of defending economic development, prosperity, and growth opportunities, as well as interests abroad. Lastly, the third part is National Defense of Malaysia's objectives. Objectives of National Defense of Malaysia are classified on 5 events. First and foremost, the objective of establishing various domain capabilities to deter, deny, and detect any threat towards interests of Malaysia's national defense, simultaneously with the concentric layers of the core, extended, and forward areas. Additionally, the purpose of boosting Malaysia's internal resilience among comprehensive defense by approving the whole of government and whole of society approaches. Furthermore, bolstering the capacity and security of national defense of Malaysia via credible partnerships, especially by encouraging innovative initiatives, expanding cooperation and attempting multi-level commitment of defense in a harmonious aspect. Moreover, one of the objectives of national defense of Malaysia is to upgrade the defense industry of Malaysia as a catalyst through accelerate niche-based self-resilience programs in broadening the nation's defense science, technology and industry. Last but not least, to assure pleasure administration practices in nourishing the defense sector by uniting accountability, transparency and excellence in seeking organizational transformations. Other than that, Malaysia Armed Forces are known as Angkatan Tentera Malaysia ATM, involve three branches which are the Malaysian Army or known as Tentera Darat Malaysia TDM, the Royal Malaysian Navy RMN or known as Tentera Laut Diraja Malaysia TLDM, and the Royal Malaysian Air Force RMAF or known as Tentera Udara Diraja Malaysia TUDM. Yang di-Pertuan Agong YDPA, the King of Malaysia, is the Supreme Commander of the Malaysia Armed Forces. Firstly, Malaysian Army. After the independence of Malaysia, the Malaysian Army was fully grown and fitted to manage affairs against revolt. Presently, the Army Forces is being promptly rationalized as a conventional military force adequate of encountering future challenges. Secondly, the Royal Malaysian Navy RMN. The Royal Malaysian Navy was founded on 27th April 1934 in Singapore as the Straits Settlements Navy Voluntary Reserve Force. The force was expanded in 1938 when the branch of Penang was established and alternated the name to the Royal Malayan Navy Volunteer Force. Queen Elizabeth II bestowed the royal title on the Malayan Navy in Malaya in 1952. Tentera Laut Diraja Malaysia TLDM was the name given after the independence of Malaysia in 1963. Lastly, the Royal Malaysian Air Force RMAF. The British established the Straits Settlements Volunteer Air Force SSVAF in 1936, which was the beginning of the Tentera Udara Diraja Malaysia TUDM. In 1940, this force was renamed the Malayan Volunteers Air Force. However, it was abolished after World War II, when the first twin Pioneer aircraft landed at the RAF Kuala Lumpur base in 1958. The Malayan Air Force was born. The Royal Malayan Air Force, also known as Tentera Udara Diraja Malaysia TUDM, was founded on 2nd of June 1958.
Now let's move to the next part, which is education. According to the Cambridge Dictionary, education is defined as the process of teaching or learning, particularly in a school or college, as well as the knowledge gained from it. The Education Act of 1996 is an expansion and reform of the Education Act of 1961, fully intent on reinforcing the public school system in accordance with Malaysia's desires to turn into a focal point of greatness in top-notch and elite education. The objective of establishing the Education Act of 1996 was to widen the extent of instruction regulation and present new regulation. The Education Act 1996 accommodates preschool education in the national education system. Through the preschool education policy, the Ministry of Education plays vital roles in providing preschool education to kids aged from 4 to 6 years. The period of mandatory education is for 6 years. Now, I will explain about the Ministries of Education. The educational system in Malaysia is supervised by the Ministry of Education Malaysia (MOE), which is headed by Muhammad Razi Majidin as the Minister of Education. Ministry of Education or Kementerian Pelajaran Malaysia are responsible for all the education-related affairs, which refers to the education from preschool up to the secondary level. Meanwhile, higher education is administered by the Ministry of Higher Education, which was established in 2004 and is currently headed by the Honorable Datuk Seri Dr. Noorani Ahmad. The vital role of the Ministry of Higher Education is making an advanced education environment with the best public universities, private higher educational institutions, polytechnics and community college. Malaysian education consists of several stages, which begins with preschool and primary school, secondary school and higher education. There are few types of primary and secondary schools. For example, national schools, cluster schools, national type schools, technical and vocational schools. Public primary schools in Malaysia are partitioned into two types, which are national schools and national type schools. Furthermore, there are two types of secondary schools, which are lower and upper secondary. Lower secondary level consists of students aged 13 to 15 years, which are from Form 1 until Form 3 that will be given exposure in various subjects. Meanwhile, upper secondary is provided for students aged 16 to 17 years. Standardized examinations are a common feature in Asian countries such as Singapore and China. Meanwhile, in Malaysia, there are 5 national public tests. First and foremost, the Primary School Assessment Test (UPSR), which is administered during the 6th year of primary school but already passed out in beginning of 2021. This is followed by the Form 3 Assessment (PT3). It is a center for assessment part in school-based assessment (PBS). Meanwhile, students in Form 5 will be taken the Sijil Pelajaran Malaysia (SPM). It is the public primary examination controlled midway and is directed toward the finish of auxiliary schooling. Furthermore, pre-university students will take the Sijil Tinggi Persekolahan Malaysia (STPM). It is controlled by the Malaysian Examination Council, which presented a new measured STPM design in 2012. Under this new measured framework, the outcomes will be checked and embraced by a Cambridge assessment from the UK to maintain the norm and quality of this program. Last but not least, for the religious secondary school students will sit for Sijil Tinggi Agama Malaysia, which is an examination that was first presented in 2000 because of a collaboration between the Ministry of Education Malaysia and Al-Azhar Al-Sharif. It is a public examination administered by the Examination Board to empower Malaysian and non-Malaysian students to pursue their studies at Al-Azhar University, Khairul, Egypt, or at a public university in Malaysia.
In conclusion, the Federal Constitution is the backbone of our country. It is crucial for Malaysians to follow the laws of the country in this regard because there are many benefits that we would receive as Malaysian citizens. This clearly illustrates that Malaysia Ministry of Foreign Affairs (MOFA) pursue an independent, principled and sensible foreign policy founded on the ideals of peace, humanity and equality. Furthermore, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs (MOFA) is in charge of a number of critical functions, including dissemination of information on key diplomatic operations and the evolution of foreign policy. Malaysian national defence is supported by 3 pillars: concentrated deterrence, comprehensive defence, and credible partnerships. Following that, the Malaysian Army (TDM), the Royal Malaysian Navy (TLDM), and the Royal Malaysian Air Force are emphasized PUTM. In Malaysia, there are 5 sorts of examinations, which is Primary School Assessment Test (UPSR), Form 3 Assessment PT3, Sijil Pelajaran Malaysia (SPM), Sijil Tinggi Persekolahan Malaysia (STPM), and Sijil Tinggi Agama Malaysia (STAP). To summarize, education is key for producing a highly educated and intelligent generation.